I want you to picture the worst moment of my life happening in front of 300 strangers in expensive dresses, with my own daughter standing 10 feet away and doing absolutely nothing to stop it. That's where I'm going to start, because I think you deserve the ending before you get the middle. Security guards had my arms. A man half my age was pointing at me like I was something he'd found on the bottom of his shoe. And behind him, through a set of glass doors, string lights, and white flowers stretched across a ballroom I had helped pay for without anyone ever thanking me. I'm going to tell you how I got there, and I'm going to tell you what happened next, because what happened next is the reason I'm typing this out at 11 at night instead of sleeping. Before I go further, if stories like this keep you up scrolling the way they keep me up writing them, do me a favor and hit subscribe. It genuinely helps this channel, and it means more of these stories get told the right way. Drop your comment in the comment section and tell us where you're watching from. My name doesn't matter much for this story, so let's just say I go by Walt. I'm 68 years old. I spent 31 years running a metal stamping line outside Cleveland, Ohio, the kind of job where you clock in before sunrise and your hands smell like machine oil no matter how many times you wash them. Before that, I did 2 tours overseas in my 20s, came home in one piece, and consider myself lucky for it every single day since. I grew up the son of a bricklayer in a house where nobody ever had extra of anything. We didn't call it poor back then. We just called it normal. That upbringing stuck with me my whole life. I learned early that you fix what's broken yourself before you ask a neighbor for help, and you don't complain about a job just because it's hard. My wife Diane passed when our daughter Sarah was 6. Cancer took her fast, faster than the doctors expected, and I was left raising a little girl alone on a factory paycheck in a 2-bedroom rental with a leaky roof. I patched myself 3 different summers. I'm not telling you that for sympathy. I'm telling you because it explains everything that came after. Every extra shift I picked up, every vacation I skipped, every worn-out pair of boots I kept wearing instead of buying new ones, it all went toward one thing: making sure Sarah never had to feel what I felt growing up unsure of where the next month's rent was coming from. I coached her softball team for 6 years, even though I didn't know the first thing about softball when I started. I learned right alongside her. Those Saturday mornings on a dusty field in Cleveland are still some of the best memories I own. She got through college. She got a good job in finance in Boston. And 3 years ago, she met a man named Todd Caldwell. Todd came from money, the kind of money that's been in a family so long nobody talks about where it came from anymore. His father, Gerald Caldwell, built a chain of commercial real estate developments across New England starting in the late 70s, back when he was young and had nothing but a construction loan and a lot of nerve. By the time Todd came along, Gerald had turned it into a name people in Boston recognized on sight. And Todd grew up in a house with a private tennis court and a housekeeper who'd been with the family longer than he'd been alive. Todd worked in acquisitions at his father's company, on track to run the whole operation himself one day, and he carried himself like a man who had never once been told no. The first time I met him, I drove 3 hours in my old pickup truck to their family's place outside Boston. I wore the best suit I owned, which, if I'm honest, wasn't much. Todd opened the door, looked me up and down, and asked if I was there to fix something. I laughed it off, told him I was Sarah's father. He recovered fast, put on a smile, shook my hand a little too hard. But I saw it, that half second before he corrected himself. I've been around long enough to know what that look means. Over lunch that day, he found little ways to remind me where I stood. Asked if I'd ever thought about retirement communities. Asked how factory pensions held up these days. Like he already knew the answer and wanted to watch me say it out loud. Sarah didn't catch any of it. She just saw 2 men who were a little different, having a slightly awkward first meeting. I let it go, because she was happy, and her happiness was the only thing that ever really mattered to me. A few weeks later, Todd called me himself, said he wanted to talk man to man. I actually thought, for a second, that he was going to apologize for the comments at lunch. Instead, he told me he was sending me an envelope with $1,000 in it. Said it was for a proper suit, because he couldn't have Sarah's father looking, in his words, like he'd wandered in off the street at the wedding. He said it like he was doing me a favor. I've been broke before. I've been tired before. I've been talked down to by men who thought their paycheck made them better than me. But I don't think I've ever felt something land quite like that did. I told him no. I told him I built a life with my own 2 hands, and I didn't need his charity to stand in a room. He got quiet. Then his voice changed, and he said something I still remember word for word. You really don't understand who you're dealing with, Walt." Then he hung up. If you're new here and you want to know how this story ends, subscribing to the channel is honestly the easiest way to make sure you don't miss it. We put a lot into these, and it helps more than you'd think. A few days later, Sarah called me in tears. Not because of what Todd did, because of what he told her I did. According to Todd, I was the one who got upset over nothing. He said he'd offered to help me look nice for the wedding, and I'd exploded at him over the phone, cursed him out, embarrassed him. None of that happened. But Sarah didn't know that. She only had his version, and she believed it because she loved him. I tried to explain my side. She kept cutting in, defending him, telling me he was generous and thoughtful, and that I was the one who couldn't accept help. That was the first time in 20-something years I heard real distance in my own daughter's voice when she talked to me. I didn't fight her on it. I just told her I loved her and I'd see her at the wedding. Then I sat in my kitchen for a long time after he hung up. In the months before the wedding, Todd kept at it in smaller ways. Calls warning me not to cause more problems. Comments about how Sarah would always choose him over me if it came down to it. I never repeated any of it to her because I didn't want to put her in the middle of something she didn't ask for. Instead of shrinking, I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened up an account I'd barely touched, money I'd been setting aside without a real plan for it. And I drove into downtown Cleveland on a Saturday morning to a little tailor shop I'd walked past 100 times, but never once gone inside. The man measuring my shoulders asked if this was for something special. I told him it was for my daughter's wedding, and he nodded like he understood exactly what that meant without me having to explain any further. I picked out charcoal gray, tailored, the kind of suit I never let myself spend money on because there was always something more important to pay for first. Diane's medical bills, Sarah's tuition, new brakes on the truck instead of new shoes for myself. This time, for the first time in longer than I could remember, I bought something just for me. I paid for it in full, in cash, and I didn't tell a soul, not even Sarah. I wasn't buying it to prove anything to Todd. I was buying it because I decided, somewhere in those quiet weeks of feeling smaller and smaller in my own daughter's life, that I was not going to let another man's opinion of me decide how I showed up for something I'd waited 68 years to see. My little girl getting married. The wedding was at a hotel in downtown Boston, the kind of place with marble floors and a doorman who calls everyone sir, whether they belong there or not. I drove in that morning in my old truck, parked to myself, and walked up in my new suit feeling something close to steady for the first time in months. I made it about 15 feet from the entrance before Todd stepped in front of me. He didn't lower his voice. He said, loud enough for the guests behind him to hear, that this event was for people who understood how to carry themselves, and that I didn't belong inside. Then he waved over 2 security guards and told them to escort me off the property. I didn't yell. I didn't fight it. I just stood there while 2 men half my age put their hands on my arms and started walking me toward the doors I'd come in through. Sarah was somewhere inside that ballroom, getting ready, completely unaware that her father was being thrown out of her own wedding by the man she was about to marry. That's the moment I told you about at the start of this story. If you've made it this far, you already know I'm not writing this from a place of defeat. Subscribe now if you haven't, because what happens in the next few minutes of that day is the entire reason I decided to write any of this down. Just as the guards reached the doors, a voice cut through the lobby. It was Gerald, Todd's father. Gerald froze the second he got a clear look at my face. He walked straight past his son, past the guards, and stood right in front of me like he'd seen a ghost. Then he said my name. Not sir. My actual name, one I hadn't heard from a stranger's mouth in over 50 years. He turned to the crowd that had gathered and told them who I was. Not Sarah's father. Not some man in a suit that didn't fit the room. He told them that in 1971, outside Saigon, a rocket attack tore through his unit's vehicle, and he was trapped inside as it caught fire. He told them a 20-year-old soldier ran through open gunfire, pulled him out with seconds to spare before the ammunition inside went up, and never once asked for anything in return. That soldier was me. Gerald had spent decades trying to track me down to say thank you, and instead, he found me being dragged out of a hotel lobby by his own son's security detail. I wish I could tell you Todd apologized right away, but the truth is he just stood there, pale, while his father tore into him in front of everyone. Gerald told him, in no uncertain terms, that the man he'd just called unworthy of the room was the reason Gerald was alive to have a son at all. Todd tried to fix it. He offered me a seat at the head table, told the crowd there'd been a misunderstanding, I could see in his face that he wasn't sorry for what he did, only sorry it had blown up in front of people who mattered to him. I turned him down. I wasn't there for revenge, and I wasn't there for an apology performance in front of an audience. I told him the only thing I actually cared about was that he treats Sarah right for the rest of her life. Then I told Gerald I didn't feel much like staying for a wedding after being thrown out of it once already. We left together and found a quiet Irish pub a few blocks away. Gerald and I sat in that pub for almost 3 hours. We talked about the years in between, the families we'd built, the mistakes we'd made. He told me, more than once, that all his money hadn't taught his son the one thing that actually mattered, which is that decency doesn't come with a price tag or a zip code. I never expected anything for what I did back in 1971. I still don't think I deserve credit for it. Any man in that vehicle would have wanted someone to do the same for him. But sitting there with Gerald, I understood something I hadn't fully let myself believe in the months leading up to that wedding. The way a person treats you when they think you have nothing to offer them tells you everything you need to know about who they really are. Sarah and I talked a few days later, sitting at my kitchen table where I'd patched that leaky roof so many summers ago. I told her the truth, all of it, calmly, without asking her to choose sides. She cried harder than I'd seen her cry since she was a little girl. She apologized for not listening sooner, for letting a few months of someone else's version of events put a crack in something we'd spent her whole life building. I told her I forgave her before she even finished asking, because that's what you do for your kid, no exceptions. She's still figuring out what to do with a husband who showed his true colors in front of everyone he was trying to impress. That part isn't my story to finish, and I won't pretend otherwise. Whatever she decides, I told her the same thing I told Todd that night. Her happiness is the only thing that ever really mattered to me, and it still is. Why to know is this? I walked into that hotel in a suit I paid for with my own hands, carrying nothing but the truth of who I am. And by the end of the night, the truth was the only thing anyone in that room was talking about. Gerald still calls me most weeks now. Sometimes we talk about the war. Most of the time we just talk about nothing, the way old friends do, and I've come to realize it's its own kind of gift I never expected to get back after all these years. If this story meant something to you, subscribing to this channel really does make a difference for us. It helps these stories reach more people who need to hear that dignity isn't something anyone else gets to hand out or take away. Thanks for reading this one all the way through.